Hey anglers, have we got a treat for you. Today we will be stalking rainbow trout by air in the upper Sierra Lakes.
In 2013, a man named Ted Hallows strapped a GoPro camera to the belly of a small aircraft. He described the idea almost casually. Afterward, he just wanted to see what it looked like from underneath. Hallows runs the state fish hatchery in Camas, Utah, and he spent nearly 40 years raising trout and quietly coordinating something most Americans have absolutely no idea their own government does. Every summer, a single-engine Cessna skims roughly 100 feet above the highest lakes in Utah and releases live fish directly into open air, thousands of them at a time. No parachute, no container, just fingerlings tumbling loose through the wind, and more than 95% of them survive the fall. Hallows' footage went viral almost immediately. Millions of people watched fish rain down out of a clear sky and called it a dream job, a quiet miracle of engineering, maybe the coolest thing any government agency had ever stumbled into by accident. But the viral clip always left out the strangest part of the whole story. The lakes those fish were being dropped into were never actually empty to begin with, and the same aircraft everyone fell in love with online had quietly, for decades, been undoing something nobody ever thought to film. A country that suddenly had time to fish. Millions of veterans came home. Families grew. New highways opened up the American West. And a country that suddenly had both time and money to spare went fishing in enormous numbers, almost overnight. By the early 1950s, recreational fishing had already become a multi-million-dollar industry, and individual states were racing to open new water and stock new fish as fast as they could manage it. The appetite was genuinely enormous. Back during the Depression, the Civilian Conservation Corps had already poured nearly 1 billion fish into American lakes and streams, building hatcheries that stretched from Oregon all the way to the Carolinas. The tradition of stocking fish was already a generation old before Utah ever looked seriously at expanding it further. But Utah's geography broke that established tradition completely. The Uinta Mountains, the only major east-west mountain range in the lower 48 states, hold more than 650 lakes sitting above 9,000 feet. Glaciers had carved them directly out of solid granite. Waterfalls had sealed most of them off entirely. Most sit 10 to 15 miles from the nearest road, reachable only past boulder fields and switchbacks that would snap a vehicle's axle without hesitation. And here's the key fact the entire story ultimately turns on. These lakes were naturally fishless. Not because the water itself was somehow unsuitable, because any trout attempting to swim upstream would eventually hit a 40-foot waterfall and simply stop. For roughly 10,000 years, nothing with fins had ever made it past those falls. Mules, milk cans, and a math problem that never worked. The first solution attempted was straightforward and, frankly, brutal. Workers loaded young fingerlings into 3-foot metal milk cans, one side flattened deliberately so it could ride pressed against a mule's back. A team would set out at dawn, animals climbing roughly 1,000 feet of elevation per mile. At night, handlers laid the cans sideways in running streams to keep fresh, oxygenated water moving continuously past the fish's gills. Trout eggs, separately, traveled wrapped in wet moss, packed with chipped ice. The entire operation rested on nothing but the endurance of horses and men, and a single stumble on a granite switchback could mean an entire can of dead fish spilled uselessly into the dirt. There were 650 lakes needing restocking every few years, and maybe 3 usable months of open summer each year to reach them. The math simply never worked. Then California changed everything. Biologists working in the Sierra Nevada had started releasing fingerlings directly from small aircraft, the fish so small and light that ordinary air resistance slowed their fall the same way it slows a falling leaf. Word of the technique spread quickly through state wildlife agencies nationwide. Around 1956, Utah launched its own aerial stocking program. Ted Hallows' hatchery in Camas would eventually grow into the operational heart of it. Why falling fish actually survive. The idea sounds, on its face, almost like a prank. Load baby fish into a plane, fly low, open a valve, and let gravity handle the rest. But the genuinely hard part was never the flying itself. It was keeping the fish alive on the way down. A fingerling trout measures roughly 1 to 3 inches long and weighs almost nothing at all. And that fact alone is the entire reason this method works. Drop something that small and light from a moving aircraft, and it doesn't plummet the way you'd expect. The surrounding air catches it, cushions its fall, the same basic physics that lets a feather drift gently while a stone drops straight down. The fish tumble together inside a burst of water released from the tank at the exact same instant. And that water cushions the impact, keeps their gills wet during the fall, and breaks the surface tension of the lake waiting below. They typically hit the water gently enough to right themselves almost immediately and swim off within seconds. The aircraft used is a single-engine Cessna 185 Skywagon, a rugged workhorse originally built for short runways and thin mountain air. A custom tank mounted behind the pilot holds hundreds of pounds of water alongside up to 84 pounds of live fish, divided across 7 separate chambers. 7 chambers, 7 lakes, 1 continuous flight, no landing required in between. A single flight can carry well over 10,000 fingerlings, and a single working day can cover somewhere between 40 and 60 separate lakes. The fish are deliberately taken off feed beforehand to reduce overall stress during transport. Once over the target lake, the pilot drops down to somewhere between 50 and 150 feet, opens a valve, and 1 full chamber empties in a controlled 3-second burst. Then the plane simply banks toward the next lake on the list, flying where the air barely holds a plane up. And these are genuinely difficult, high-stakes flights. As Hallows put it himself, the agency relies on its own specially skilled pilots, trained specifically for a kind of low-level flying that carries very real risk. They regularly operate at elevations of 12,000 to 13,000 feet, where the air is thin enough that a plane barely retains sufficient lift to pull cleanly out of a dive if something goes wrong. Across 4 decades, Hallows estimates he's personally flown somewhere around 800 of these individual stocking runs. Some of them have gotten genuinely strange along the way. He's described accidentally dumping fish directly onto people float tubing in the middle of a lake, momentarily covering them in fish. Another time, the plane returned to the hatchery with actual tree branches still lodged in its tires. Biologists confirmed the method's effectiveness almost immediately after the program began. They'd set gill nets in a target lake within minutes of a drop and pull them back up shortly after, and more than 95% of the released fingerlings had reliably survived. The flutter effect was real. The underlying physics genuinely held up under testing. Why not drones or helicopters? Every time this footage resurfaces and goes viral again, someone inevitably asks why the state doesn't just switch to drones or helicopters instead. The honest answer is simpler than it sounds. No commercial drone currently on the market can lift 84 pounds of combined fish and water at 9,000 feet of elevation. Helicopters, meanwhile, struggle noticeably in thin alpine air, requiring far more fuel for far less usable payload weight at a dramatically higher cost per flight hour. Even if you somehow paved a direct road to every single one of these lakes, the Cessna would still end up being the cheaper option overall. And here's the detail Americans tend to appreciate most about the whole program. It doesn't cost general taxpayers a single cent. Each individual fingerling costs roughly $1 to raise from egg to release. The entire system runs on funding from the Dingell-Johnson Act, a federal excise tax levied on fishing gear matched directly against state fishing license revenue. In Utah specifically, $2 from every single fishing license sold goes straight into the dedicated hatchery fund. Anglers buy licenses. Licenses fund hatcheries. Hatcheries raise fish. The plane drops the fish. Anglers go fishing. The entire system pays for itself and has done so continuously for roughly 70 years. A database going back to 1979. By 2025, Utah's Division of Wildlife Resources had stocked more than 11 million fish across over 600 separate water bodies in a single year, actually a slight decrease from the prior year, since biologists had deliberately shifted toward releasing fewer fish overall, but larger individual fish, for improved long-term survival rates. The aerial program itself is just one component of a system so extensive that the state logs every single stocking event in a public database stretching back to 1,979 species, date, lake, exact number released, fully searchable by anyone with a web browser. Pulling up that database reveals a genuinely staggering scale of activity. Thousands of individual stocking events every year, going back nearly half a century without interruption. The specific species stocked rotate with the seasons. Brook, rainbow, and tiger trout dominate summer releases. Native Bonneville cutthroat and Arctic grayling follow in fall. Popular lakes located near easy trailheads get refilled annually. More remote backcountry basins run instead on a 3 to 5 year rotation, with each individual lake's stocking schedule determined by its specific depth, elevation, and whatever managed to survive the previous winter. And most of what's released does not, in fact, survive the winter. These high-altitude lakes freeze deep enough that ice seals the entire surface for months at a stretch. Oxygen levels drop until fish simply suffocate. Biologists refer to this recurring phenomenon as winter kill. Add to that the fact that most of the stock trout are deliberately bred sterile, physically incapable of reproducing at all, and it becomes clear why the plane never actually stops flying. It isn't topping these lakes off from year to year. It's effectively refounding them from scratch every single season. The anglers who earn the fishing. The people who care most about this program are, understandably, the backcountry anglers who hike 15 miles across exposed granite and sleep at 10,000 feet just to fish water. Almost nobody else will ever see in person. To them, a stocking drop overhead isn't a crash or a splash in the distance. It's a sudden burst of what looks like rain falling from an otherwise clear sky, followed instantly by silver shapes darting through water that had been completely empty just an hour earlier. The trout grow remarkably fast, feeding on insects that have genuinely never been hunted by anything before. The fishing itself, by every available account, is extraordinary. For nearly 60 years, essentially nobody outside Utah knew any of this operation existed. Then Hallows mounted that GoPro to his plane, and a quiet government fish hatchery accidentally turned into a viral internet sensation. Not a sentence anyone at the Division of Wildlife Resources ever expected to find themselves writing. But those viral clips only ever showed the falling fish. They never once showed what the lake had actually looked like before the plane arrived. What empty was actually hiding? Here's what the footage never captured. Those alpine lakes were never truly empty. They were fishless, and fishless, it turns out, was the entire point. The very waterfalls that had kept trout out for 10,000 straight years had left room for an entirely different kind of ecosystem to flourish undisturbed. Mountain yellow-legged frogs bred freely in the shallows, their eggs drifting safely in water with nothing around to hunt them. Salamanders worked the muddy banks at dusk without concern. Zooplankton grew thick enough in places to visibly cloud the water in the right light. Insects blanketed the surface every single evening. These were, quite simply, some of the last genuinely fish-free freshwater ecosystems remaining anywhere in North America. Not dead, not empty. Complete in a way that had nothing whatsoever to do with the presence of fish. Think of it as a savings account, quietly collecting interest for 10,000 uninterrupted years. Frogs, insects, larvae, zooplankton, all compounding undisturbed, generation after generation. Then trout finally arrived. Trout are visual hunters by nature, and they went straight for the biggest, most visible prey available first: tadpoles, larvae, anything moving conspicuously through open water. One withdrawal after another, with no new deposits ever coming back in to replace them. Could birds have done this naturally? Every time this story resurfaces publicly, someone inevitably asks whether birds could have simply carried fish eggs into those lakes naturally, given enough time. It's actually a genuinely old idea, Darwin wrote about the possibility himself, and so did Wallace and Lyell after him. But a 2018 scientific review found no confirmed case anywhere of trout eggs surviving transport on a bird's feet or feathers. Then, in 2020, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences added an interesting twist to the question. Hungarian researchers demonstrated that invasive carp eggs, notably tough and biologically dormant, could pass alive through a duck's digestive tract and still successfully hatch afterward. But trout eggs are soft and fragile by comparison. Even if a heron swallowed one tomorrow, it simply wouldn't survive the trip intact. Not by feet and not by feathers either. The waterfalls held their barrier for 10,000 years for a genuine physical reason. Without an airplane, those particular lakes would very likely never have held fish at all. When the damage became visible, the consequences first became clearly visible in California. The mountain yellow-legged frog, once so numerous that a 1,915 field survey crew reportedly complained about accidentally stepping on them, vanished from more than 90% of its historical range. Introduced trout stand as one of the leading documented causes. The tadpoles simply had no defenses built up against them, no burst of speed, no toxins, no learned instinct to hide. They'd evolved for 10,000 years in water where nothing had ever hunted them. The moment a genuine visual predator finally showed up, that entire evolutionary equation collapsed almost overnight. And the broader strangeness of what people were doing to the backcountry didn't stop with fish either. In Idaho's Frank Church Wilderness, wildlife officials faced a beaver overpopulation problem back in 1948. Too many animals concentrated in the wrong places. Their solution was pure mid-century American ingenuity. They loaded the beavers into wooden crates, put the crates on planes, and parachuted the animals directly into remote mountain terrain. One particular lead beaver, nicknamed Geronimo, reportedly rode so many practice test drops that his handlers said he'd eventually climb back into the crate on his own without being coaxed. It actually worked. The relocated beavers thrived in their new mountain habitat. People were, quite literally, airdropping entire pieces of ecosystem into the American West and simply hoping for the best outcome. But in that same wilderness area, stock trout had already been cutting frog and salamander populations, not just in isolated single lakes, but across entire connected drainage basins. The very airplane that had filled the American West with fish had, quietly and simultaneously, been emptying it of something else entirely. Two honest sides to the same story. The lakes didn't simply come alive the moment fish arrived. They traded one kind of thriving life for a completely different one. So, who's actually right here? Because this is precisely where the story genuinely splits into two honest, defensible sides, and both sides have a legitimate case to make. Anglers will correctly tell you this program gave millions of Americans something genuinely irreplaceable: 70 years of access to remote wild country, a fully self-funded tradition that costs general taxpayers absolutely nothing, fish now swimming in water that would otherwise sit permanently silent. Take that away entirely, and you erase more than a simple hobby. You erase an entire way of life built around it. Biologists will also correctly tell you this program was carried out across some of the last, genuinely fishless ecosystems remaining anywhere on the continent before anyone fully understood what those ecosystems actually were. That a frog population capable of surviving 10,000 uninterrupted years can vanish from a single lake in one bad season once the wrong predator shows up. Quiet reform without a press release. The remarkable part is that the people actually running this program didn't wait to be publicly shamed into acknowledging both sides of the issue. Meaningful reform began quietly, without any formal press release announcing it. Today, most of the trout dropped from Utah's aircraft are triploid eggs, deliberately subjected to thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch immediately after fertilization, forcing in an extra full set of chromosomes. The permanent result is complete sterility. This gives anglers a genuine catch to pursue without ever risking an uncontrolled population that spreads somewhere it doesn't belong. There's even an added bonus: triploid trout tend to grow noticeably larger overall, since the energy that would otherwise go towards spawning gets redirected entirely into growth instead. Utah's native Bonneville cutthroat trout now gets carefully, deliberately stocked back into waters where it historically belonged in the first place. And in select locations, stocking has simply stopped altogether. Biologists have netted out every last fish from a handful of chosen lakes and deliberately stepped back to observe what happens next. The results arrived faster than almost anyone had predicted. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences tracked 5 separate Sierra Nevada lakes after every trout had been removed. Frog populations began recovering almost immediately. The same basic pattern repeated in the Italian Alps, the Klamath Mountains, and North Cascades National Park amphibian populations, bouncing back within roughly 2 to 5 years in each case. It isn't a universally clean answer everywhere, though. Deep lakes featuring rocky shallow zones can still support frogs and trout living side by side without major conflict. The worst documented damage consistently hits small, shallow lakes, where a tadpole simply has nowhere left to hide from a hunting fish. And in 2026, the division published a formal 30-year management plan, openly acknowledging that the entire program is still actively being recalibrated against whatever the ongoing science continues to reveal. Empty was never the right word. The old operating rule used to be simple: stock everything you possibly can. The new rule is stock carefully and prove first that it won't spread uncontrollably. A single Cessna, 7 chambers, fingerlings barely 2 inches long, fluttering gently down through thin mountain air, across hundreds of lakes, every single summer, for 70 straight years. A method originally borrowed from California, quietly proven with hidden gill nets across half a century of testing, then handed to millions of internet viewers by one camera, a single man happened to bolt to the belly of his plane. Ted Hallows was never a villain in this story, and he was never a fool either. Neither were the men who first launched this program back in 1956. They were solving a genuinely real problem, giving people more places to fish across mountains a mule could barely reach in the first place. What none of them could have possibly known at the time was that empty was never actually a simple fact about these lakes. It was a story people told themselves about places they simply didn't yet fully understand. Sometimes the most ingenious thing a person ever builds, and the single most consequential mistake they ever make, turn out to be exactly the same act. It just takes the science a few decades to eventually tell you which one it actually was. And sometimes, the honest answer turns out to be both at once. So here's the real question, and I genuinely want a straight answer from you in the comments. Would you keep dropping sterile fish from the sky to protect a 70-year American tradition? Or should every last alpine lake go back to exactly what the glaciers originally left behind? There's no easy call here, and that's precisely the point of asking. Tell me where you personally land on it. And if you've ever hiked into one of these lakes yourself, I especially want to hear directly from you.